My son was still breathing through a machine when his wife changed the locks, emptied our joint account, and claimed the house. I stood outside, coatless, watching strangers carry out our memories. It hurt. Not just the betrayal, but how quietly it all happened. Then the phone rang, and with it, a truth even she couldn't silence. I never imagined my front door could feel unfamiliar. It was the same chipped white paint, the same tiny crack in the tile just beneath the welcome mat. But that afternoon, it didn't welcome me. It shut me out. The day Bryce brought Autumn home was the last time the place had felt warm. Back then, I had tried. I really did. I offered her the master bedroom without her asking. I gave up my Sunday mornings at the kitchen window so she could play her podcasts while making almond milk lattes. I smiled when she rearranged the photos on the mantel, pushing my late husband's picture to the far corner. I told myself this was how families grow. But you can't grow something that's being quietly uprooted behind your back. Before the accident, Bryce and I had a rhythm. He'd always ask me to taste his chili, even when Autumn said it was too salty. He'd take walks with me by the marina, laughing at the pelicans fighting over scraps. He'd hug me in the hallway for no reason at all. After he married her, those moments became less frequent, but they never fully disappeared. Until the night he didn't come home. The hospital called just before 2 a.m. Boat accident. He's stable but unconscious. By the time I got there, Autumn was already at his side. Mascara smudged, voice hoarse. She clutched my hand with both of hers and said, "He needs both of us now." For one brief moment, I believed her. But within hours, I was told I needed to leave the ICU. Hospital policy, she said. She'd handle everything. She would update me. Bryce needed calm, quiet, less stimulation. I was a nurse once. I knew how these things worked. But I also knew she was lying. The next morning, I drove home to change clothes and shower. I parked where I always parked, reached into my purse for the keys, and paused. The lock had been changed. At first, I thought I had made a mistake. Maybe I was tired. Maybe the key was sticking. I knocked. No answer. I tried calling Autumn. No answer. I circled to the back, where the sliding door used to groan if you opened it too fast. It didn't groan. It didn't open. It was bolted. There was an envelope taped to the mailbox. Inside, one hotel key and a note. Just 4 words. "This is for now." I remember standing there, still wearing my hospital badge, watching the neighbor's dog bark at me like I didn't belong. No one had told me I was being removed. No one had warned me. My name was on the mortgage. I helped raise the down payment. But suddenly I was a guest in my own life. At the motel, the bedspread smelled of bleach and citrus. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, coat still on. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stared at the little bottle of lotion they leave on the counter. White label, gold writing. A scent called renewal. That was the cruelest part. Renewal. Maybe some of you listening have felt it too. That moment when your life shifts and no one tells you the rules have changed. One day you're a mother, a homeowner, a trusted voice. The next you're holding a plastic key card and wondering where everything went wrong. And still I didn't call a lawyer. Still I told myself it was temporary. Still I believed my son would wake up and explain everything. Because when you're a mother, sometimes the last thing you lose is hope. Even when the lock has already been changed. The second night at the motel, I sat on the carpet by the window. There wasn't much to see, just a flickering street lamp and a dented soda can someone had kicked into the bushes. I kept the lights off and listened to the hum of the old heater working hard against the coastal chill. My phone screen lit up every so often, but it was never from Bryce. Not from Autumn either. Just bank alerts. At 3:47 a.m., the biggest one came. Withdrawal, $670,000. Source, emergency disbursement, Bryce Pennington. Purpose, claim processed. My name wasn't on the notification. I only saw it because months ago, Bryce had added my email as a backup contact for security. He never took it off. I don't think he even remembered it was there. I froze. I reread it 3 times. That policy was from a settlement Bryce had received 5 years ago after a dock collapse. He kept it active, high premium, barely touched. We agreed it was for future protection. He once told me if anything ever happened to him, that money would keep us both safe. But now it was gone. Overnight. No explanation. No discussion. I checked the timestamp. The claim was authorized just 6 hours after his surgery. He hadn't even opened his eyes yet. By mid-morning, I was at the hospital again. I walked straight to the nurse's station, kept my voice low, and asked about Bryce's condition. The nurse looked over her shoulder, clicked a few times on the screen, and then said he was stable, unresponsive, no changes. Then she leaned in slightly and whispered, "He's been upgraded to private status, family-only access." I wasn't family anymore, not by their definition. I left without a word and drove to the public library. I hadn't been there in over a year, but the computers were still free and the staff didn't ask questions. I printed out my co-ownership deed for the house, then the original policy document for the insurance, which still listed me as a co-beneficiary. At least it used to. That copy was a year old. I needed a date, a signature, proof of when it changed. On the way out, I passed by the community bulletin board. Taped in the corner was a flyer. Free legal advice for seniors. Wednesday afternoons at the church downtown. It was a Monday. I took the flyer anyway. That night, back in the motel, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I made a list. Not chores or groceries, not reminders to pay bills. I made a list of what was missing. My house key, my seat at Bryce's bedside, my name on the insurance, my place in the family. The list was short, but it felt endless, because every item wasn't just a thing, it was a part of me. 2 days later, I went to the legal clinic. The man at the folding table looked younger than he probably was, all corduroy and paper stacks. He listened while I spoke, didn't interrupt, just nodded, occasionally writing something on a yellow pad. When I finished, he didn't say much, only asked if I had Bryce's updated insurance paperwork. I told him no. He paused, then handed me a card. "Call this woman. She might help." Quietly. The name on the card was Trina Delgado, estate attorney. Her office was 10 blocks from the marina. I didn't call right away. I walked. I needed to breathe. Outside her building, I stopped, watched the boats sway in the harbor. One of them looked like the one Bryce used to take me on, back when Autumn didn't mind if we spent Sundays alone. Later that afternoon, I called. The voice on the other end was sharp but calm. She asked when I could come in. I said, "Whenever." She said, "Now." The office was clean, but lived in, not staged. A bookshelf tilted slightly to one side, and a photo of a woman in scrubs stood next to a faded legal diploma. Trina asked for the papers I had. I slid them across the desk. She read, flipped, paused, then looked up. "When did your name disappear from the beneficiary line?" "I don't know. I only saw the alert 2 nights ago." She tapped her pen twice on the desk. "Then let's find out who signed what, and when." It was the first time in days that someone looked me in the eye and didn't treat me like a nuisance or a ghost. That night, I slept without shoes on, for the first time since Bryce's accident. The next morning, I arrived at Trina Delgado's office 15 minutes early. She was already there, standing by the window with a cup of tea in one hand and a legal pad in the other. The window overlooked the harbour again, and I wondered if she chose that view on purpose. A calm before the storm. She waved me in and gestured toward the chair I'd sat in yesterday. The tea had a citrus scent this time, something warmer than the motel coffee I'd grown tired of. She didn't waste time. "I pulled the insurance transfer records," she said, flipping to a document. "Your name was officially removed from the beneficiary list 23 days ago. 2 signatures appear on the change form. One belongs to Bryce. The other was witnessed by Autumn." I leaned forward, my chest tightening. "Bryce was in surgery 23 days ago," I said. She nodded. "Exactly. He was under general anesthesia, which means he couldn't legally authorize anything, let alone sign." She slid a photocopy across the desk. The signature was shaky, inconsistent. The loops in his name were off, like someone mimicking a habit they never fully learned. I had watched Bryce sign birthday cards his whole life. That wasn't his hand. "Forgery," she said flatly. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just stared at the page like it might rearrange itself if I waited long enough. Trina continued. "If we can prove the signature was faked and the notary was coerced or falsified, the insurance company will reverse the payout and initiate a fraud case. But that's not the hard part. The hard part is the house." My pulse kicked up. She transferred the house deed into a trust. I found it this morning. She used Bryce's medical power of attorney to justify it. I sat back. It was like drowning in paperwork. Every word was legal, binding, final, and none of it came from me. "She did it fast," Trina added. "The day after the accident, before your name was officially removed. She was preparing this long before the crash." There was silence between us. Not cold, just thick. Trina tapped her pen. "Do you have access to any of his handwriting samples? Cards, notes, forms with initials?" I nodded. "Boxes of them. At the house." She nodded back, as if expecting that. "Then we need to get you back inside. Legally. Even if only for retrieval. You have a partial ownership record. We'll file for access under contested occupancy." She stood, walked to a filing cabinet, and pulled out a template form. "We'll serve her this by Thursday." Back at the motel, I made a list again. Not of missing things this time, but of what I remembered was in the hallway closet. A box with old bills and tax documents, Bryce's high school diploma, a holiday card he wrote with his sloppy teenage signature. The handwriting was different then, but still recognizably his. It had grown, not changed. I pictured Autumn standing at the kitchen counter, pen in hand, tracing his name. A little too tall on the B, a bit off on the tail of the Y. She must have practiced. 2 days later, I stood in front of my own front door again, this time with Trina beside me and a sheriff's deputy just behind. Autumn answered in yoga pants and wet hair, towel slung around her shoulders. Her eyes narrowed when she saw the envelope in the deputy's hand. She took it, barely glanced at the paper. 50 minutes, the deputy said. I didn't speak. I walked past her and headed straight for the den. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and lavender candles. Too perfect. Like it was pretending to be safe. In the hallway closet, I found the box right where I remembered. I took the whole thing. I didn't linger. I didn't touch anything else. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of the photo wall. It had changed. My face had been cut out from the family pictures. In the Thanksgiving photo from 3 years ago, Where I stood between Bryce and his father, there was now a tiny square of beige paper glued where my head used to be. They hadn't just pushed me out of the house. They had begun erasing me. Back in Trina's office, we scanned the cards, the forms, and even the old menu from a seafood shack where Bryce had scribbled his name on a comment card. All matched. All real. That night, Trina made the call to the insurance company. "I have proof of forgery," she said. "I'm forwarding documents now." She hung up and turned to me. "If they agree, the payout will freeze. An investigator will follow." I nodded, but something inside me was already shifting. This wasn't just about money anymore, or property. It was about identity. They had taken my name off paper. Then they tried to take it out of memory. And I wasn't going to let them. The day after the investigator froze the insurance payout, I found myself back in Trina's office. A different energy hung in the air. Not relief, not yet, but something sharper, more focused. She laid out the next step like pieces on a chessboard. "There's a discrepancy in the trust document," she said, pointing to the legal copy. Autumn used the medical power of attorney, but the form she submitted was outdated. It expired the week before Bryce's accident. I stared at the dates. She wasn't even careful. She was fast, ruthless, but sloppy. Trina circled 2 items on the page and leaned back. "That gives us grounds to challenge the trust. We'll file a petition this Friday. But until the hearing, I need you to lay low, stay quiet, let her believe you're stalled." That wasn't hard. I'd been silent most of my life. Later that afternoon, I returned to the marina. The harbour was calm, just light ripples, boats swaying in rhythm like breath. I walked out onto the pier, past the old bait shop, to the last bench near the railing. Bryce used to sit here when he wanted to think, his back straight, arms folded, always watching the water. I imagined him now, lying in that hospital bed, machines breathing for him, not knowing what was happening outside those sterile walls. A gust of wind pulled at my coat. I closed my eyes. 2 hours later, as I walked back to the motel, I saw her. Autumn. She was coming out of a cafe near the courthouse. Not with groceries, not with hospital paperwork, but with 2 women I didn't recognize, both laughing, both holding shopping bags. Autumn had on new boots. Her hair was styled. She looked rested. She looked free. I stood still, hidden in plain sight. She didn't see me. She didn't have to. I saw everything I needed. When I got back to my room, I made another list. Not out of habit anymore, but clarity. This time, I titled it, "Things She Didn't Expect." 1. I kept the old notarized deed from 2006. 2. I had copies of Bryce's early medical directives. 3. I knew the neighbors across the street still owed me a favor. And number 4, Trina Delgado. On Friday, we filed the petition. Trina walked it through personally. No assistance, no delays. She said the hearing would be in 10 business days. I nodded. 10 days was manageable. But that Sunday, something shifted. I woke to banging at my motel door. It wasn't loud, but urgent. When I opened it, a courier stood with a padded envelope. "Service delivery for Lorraine Madsen." I signed and opened it right there. Inside was a cease and desist letter from Autumn's attorney. It accused me of harassment, defamation, and unlawful entry into a property I no longer owned. It warned of legal action if I contacted Bryce again or attempted to interfere with the trust assets. I sat down slowly on the bed, the letter trembling in my hands. 2 hours later, Trina was pacing her office. "This is meant to intimidate you," she said. "It's all bark, no teeth. She's trying to scare you into giving up." I nodded, though my hands still shook. Not from fear, but fury. She's escalating, I said quietly, because she's scared. Not of me, of what Bryce might remember. Trina stopped pacing, her eyes fixed on me. You think he'll recover? I think he already is. That afternoon, I drove to the hospital. I didn't go inside. I parked across the street, behind a tall hedge. I watched from the car. At 3:06 p.m., Autumn walked in. No flowers, no bag. Just her phone in one hand and a leather folder in the other. At 3:49 p.m., she walked out, talking into the phone, face tight. Not smiling this time. I followed her, not closely, just enough to see where she went. She drove straight to the same law office that sent me the letter. I watched her hand the folder to the receptionist. The next morning, I called Trina. She's submitting new paperwork, I said. She's trying to tighten the net, Trina replied. But she's leaving tracks, and I think it's time we collect them. By Wednesday, Trina had secured a court-ordered inspection of the documents Autumn submitted to the insurance and real estate offices. She filed a formal request for surveillance footage from the day the signature was recorded at the bank. Friday, I got a call from Bryce's primary nurse. He opened his eyes today, she said. No speech yet, but he looked straight at me when I said his name. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat still for a long time. Something inside me softened and tightened at the same time. Bryce was coming back, and I wasn't leaving. Not this time. I didn't sleep the night after the nurse told me Bryce had opened his eyes. Something inside me had shifted again. A knot loosened, only to be replaced by a deeper tension. If he could recognize his name, then memories might follow. And with memories came questions. Dangerous ones. By morning, I was dressed and waiting in the motel lobby by 7. I had no plan to visit the hospital. I wasn't allowed, but I needed to feel close. I walked 3 blocks, bought a coffee I didn't drink, then sat on a bench near the ER entrance, blending in with the quiet movement of early morning patients and hospital staff. At 9:12 a.m., Autumn's black SUV pulled into the visitor lot. She stepped out alone, in a grey suit and her signature red lipstick. Her phone was at her ear. Her stride was sharp. She didn't look toward the bench. But I saw her hesitate as she passed the hedge, eyes flicking to the window of the ICU wing. That single moment told me everything. She knew time was running out. 2 hours later, Trina called. Her voice had an edge of restrained triumph. "We got it," she said. "The bank surveillance. The timestamp confirms she entered alone, used Bryce's ID, and walked out with the notary stamp on a document that's now under challenge. That footage puts her in breach of both fraud and forgery." I closed my eyes and let the words settle. "It's enough to request an injunction," she continued, "but we'll need a judge who's not afraid of mess." That afternoon, Trina and I met at the courthouse. She filed the emergency motion. I sat across from her in the hallway, still in the same cardigan I'd worn to the hospital bench. While we waited, I looked down at my hands. They didn't shake anymore. They felt steady, not because of certainty, but purpose. We were called into a small hearing room at 4:37 p.m. It was quiet. No jury, no audience. Just a judge, Trina, and me. Autumn wasn't there. Her attorney was. He looked like he'd skipped lunch and regretted it. The judge asked Trina to state the basis for our request. She did. Calm, precise, without one wasted word. When she played the video footage, the room went still. You could hear the audio from the bank's security camera, just ambient noise, the soft murmur of typing, the notary's voice asking for a thumbprint. But what mattered wasn't what was said. It was what was not. Bryce never appeared. not once. When the judge asked the attorney if he had a rebuttal, he requested more time. The judge gave him 48 hours. Then she looked at me. "I am granting a temporary freeze on all trust-related transactions," she said, "including any access to the insurance disbursement, real estate assets, or banking privileges tied to the contested trust." I nodded. My voice stayed in my throat. Outside the courtroom, Trina smiled for the first time since this began. "She's going to panic," she said. "I hope she does," I replied. But that night, the motel manager knocked on my door. He handed me a printed email. The sender was the new attorney on record for the trust. A different name than before. Effective immediately, the note said, I was to vacate the motel room. The bill had been transferred to a new account. The trust would no longer fund my temporary housing. I sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the sheet of paper. They'd found a loophole. The court order had frozen the trust, but my room had been paid from its periphery. A hotel corporate card issued in Autumn's name. The judge's order didn't touch it. Yet. I packed in silence. By 10 p.m., I stood at the edge of the parking lot, suitcase beside me, the night cooler than expected. I called Trina. "I'll find a room for the night," she said. "But Lorraine, this is her desperation. She's lashing out." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "She's trying to humiliate me," I said, "to break me down." Trina paused. Then her voice softened. "She doesn't understand who she's dealing with." I didn't sleep that night either, but I didn't cry, not even when the room Trina found smelled of mold and had one flickering lamp. Instead, I opened my notebook, the one I hadn't touched in weeks, and I wrote a single line. "If she wants a war of silence, I'll win it with truth." Here is your passage translated into natural American English, with all meaning preserved closely and authentically. I woke up in my new temporary rental. The ceiling had a faint crack, and the air conditioner hummed like it was struggling to breathe. But somehow, I slept more deeply than I had in weeks. Maybe because, for the first time, I wasn't afraid of autumn anymore. I was just waiting. That morning, Trina called. Her voice was sharp and steady, just like always. "We got a report from the Property Records Office," she said. "Autumn secretly requested to transfer full ownership of the house to a private trust under her name. But thanks to last week's court ruling, the paperwork was blocked halfway through." I let out a slow breath. I didn't feel triumphant, just a quiet weight lifting, like the dull pain had finally started to ease. "There's one more thing," Trina said. "I need you to come in and sign a verification form. Bryce is awake." I almost didn't believe I heard her right, but her tone was calm, certain, without a hint of doubt. "He hasn't spoken yet, but he recognized people, and he reacted when I mentioned you." The ride to the hospital felt like the longest of my life. I wasn't allowed in to see him. Trina had made that clear. But just sitting outside, looking through the glass, I knew. Bryce remembered. Autumn was still by his bedside. She was performing better than ever. Leaning gently against the bedrail, resting her hand on my son's shoulder like she hadn't slept for days out of worry. But her eyes, no matter how hard she tried, couldn't hide the tension. I waited, sat there until she stepped out to get some water. When the door clicked shut, Bryce turned his head, slowly, deliberately, and his eyes found mine. No words, no nod, just that look, but I knew he was back. I left the hospital in less than 30 minutes. Trina was waiting in the parking lot. "We have to move faster now," she said. "If Bryce can testify, the rest of this case could speed up significantly." That night, I sat alone and wrote down 3 things. Not a list this time. Just 3 crystal-clear memories from Bryce's first year living with Autumn. 1. His phone disappeared for 2 weeks. After that, every single message between us was erased. 2. The reminder about the shared secondary account Bryce once promised to keep under both our names, replaced by silence. 3. A handwritten letter from Bryce, meant for my 65th birthday. Autumn said he forgot to send it. I never saw that letter. I gave those 3 details to Trina. She was quiet for a moment. These won't hold up as direct legal evidence, she said. But they'll show the jury what it felt like for you to be slowly pushed aside. And that's what we need. In the week that followed, Autumn kept moving. Not with her usual grace, but with urgency, rushing. I saw her twice. Once with a man Trina confirmed was a real estate broker. The second time, walking out of a bank branch, the same one she used when trying to transfer the title. We were faster. Trina filed an emergency motion, a request to freeze any financial activity from Autumn. This time, the judge approved it immediately. Partly because the paperwork was so clear, and partly because a video had surfaced, footage of Autumn signing Bryce's name while he was still unconscious. That night, I got a call I never expected. It was from Bryce. His voice was faint, broken, but it was his. "Mom?" That one word stopped me cold. We didn't say much. Sometimes one word is enough. The next day, Trina said, "Bryce is ready to testify. Maybe only for a few minutes, but it's enough to confirm he didn't sign anything, and that he never authorized Autumn to act on his behalf after the accident." I nodded, didn't cry. I'd moved past the stage where tears came easily. That night, I sat on the balcony of my little rental. The wind moved across the roof. The moon was bright, the air sharp, but my heart felt warm. Autumn might have taken the house. She might have taken nearly everything. But there was one thing she could never take: the truth. And the truth was coming back, slowly but surely. The courthouse felt colder that morning, even though the sun was out. Maybe it was because I knew Autumn would be inside. Maybe it was because I had to walk through the same doors that once held the paperwork she used to strip me of my rights. But this time, I wasn't walking in alone. Trina met me at the bottom of the steps, a folder tucked tight under her arm. "Bryce gave his deposition," she said softly as we walked. "He was tired, but he was clear. He remembered everything before the accident, and he said he never signed the second trust amendment." That was enough, not to end the case, but to light a match. Inside, we were seated at the left side of the hearing room. Autumn walked in 10 minutes later, wearing a pale beige coat and oversized sunglasses. She looked around like she didn't expect to see me, but when she did, she blinked once, tilted her chin, then looked away. The judge came in. We all stood. My legs didn't tremble this time. The morning went quietly. Trina presented a timeline, showed bank transfers, time-stamped footage, medical records. There were no outbursts, no shouting, just facts, cold and lined up like dominoes. By midday, Autumn's lawyer requested a recess. When we returned, the energy in the room had shifted. Trina leaned over and whispered, "She's losing grip." Then the judge looked directly at me. "Mrs. Latham, you're listed as co-beneficiary on the original trust. Would you like to make a statement for the record?" My throat felt dry, but I stood. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, steady but soft. "My name is Lorraine Latham. I was married to Robert Latham for 42 years, and I raised our son Bryce alone after Robert passed. I helped build the foundation of our family. and I stood by Bryce through every milestone. I never imagined a time when my place in that family would be contested. Autumn's sunglasses were off now. Her lips parted slightly. She didn't expect me to speak. I was pushed out of my own home, the house my husband and I paid off over decades. I was removed from the insurance records. I was told that I had no place in my son's recovery and no legal right to stand beside him. And I remained silent, hoping Bryce would recover. He did. I looked at the judge, then at Autumn. But silence isn't loyalty, and silence is not consent. The judge nodded. Thank you. That evening, Trina and I sat at a quiet cafe near the hotel. She had her laptop open, scanning through new court memos. She'll try one more thing, Trina said. She knows she's cornered. But people like Autumn don't fold. They scheme. She was right. 2 days later, a strange thing happened. I received a letter at the motel, no return address. Inside, a small flash drive. No note. Trina ran it through her secure device. What we found was a recording, audio only, a phone conversation between Autumn and a man we couldn't identify. But the voice was hers. She was discussing contingency plans. If Bryce wakes up and talks, we'll shift everything to the Nevada account. He won't know the passwords. And the old woman, well, she'll run out of steam eventually. Trina sat back in her chair. That's not just cold, she said. That's planning to obstruct the process. If we trace the account, that's federal. I said nothing. I just stared at the device. Later that night, I visited Bryce again. He was sitting up, alert, thinner than I remembered, but his eyes were his own. He reached out, fingers slightly shaking, and I took his hand. I didn't sign any of it, he said. I wanted you safe. I told her to leave you in the house. My chest tightened. I know, I whispered. He looked down. She said it was temporary, that you were staying at a spa. I didn't find out what she did until the nurse slipped me a note. So that's how it started. A note. A truth passed hand to hand, hidden in silence. The next morning, Trina filed for a full audit of all financial movements made under the trust since the day of Bryce's accident. The court approved the motion. Autumn didn't show up that day. She sent another attorney, this one younger, quieter, avoiding eye contact. At noon, Trina received a call from an anonymous source. A woman said she had worked for Autumn briefly as a personal assistant. She claimed Autumn kept a burner phone, used only to contact a fixer who handled delicate matters. Trina asked her to come forward. The woman declined, but she sent screenshots, messages, passwords. At the bottom of one screenshot, there was a list of names, mine, Bryce's, the bank manager's, and a line beneath mine that read, "Push her out now, before he talks." Trina printed the page, tucked it into a new folder. I sat across from her. She wanted to erase me, I said. Not just from the trust, from everything. Trina nodded. And she almost did. But now, we erase her lies, piece by piece. I left the office with a strange kind of calm that night. Not joy, not relief, just clarity. I had been erased once. Now I was writing myself back in. It was just after sunrise when Trina called. Her voice was sharper than usual, like something had just clicked. She's trying to liquidate the assets in Reno, she said. I just got notice from a financial compliance officer. The bank flagged a $140,000 transfer attempt under a secondary trust name we hadn't seen before. I didn't say anything. I sat there on the edge of the bed in my small motel room, staring at the light creeping across the floor. I wasn't surprised. I was just tired of being one step behind her. We've got the account frozen. Temporarily, Trina continued, but I'll need a notarized statement from you today. We're going to file for emergency injunction. This will get real fast. That afternoon, we met in a quiet legal office just outside the city. A paralegal walked in with the document. It was thick, nearly 40 pages. But my hand didn't tremble as I signed it. Once this goes through, Trina said, we'll force a hearing on the hidden trusts and insurance transfers. Autumn won't be able to hide anymore. I looked her in the eye. Do it. By evening, the motion was submitted to court and marked for expedited review. Everything moved faster now. It was as if the case had caught fire. Back at the hospital, Bryce's condition was stabilizing. He was moved out of ICU. His memory was coming back in fragments. But he could speak clearly now, and he started to ask questions. He asked where I had been, what had happened to the house, and why Autumn never let me near him. I answered carefully. Not because I wanted to spare him, but because I didn't want him to carry shame for something he never caused. She made decisions you didn't approve, I said, and she kept you from knowing. He nodded slowly. I feel like there's a whole year missing. There is, I said. Bryce closed his eyes. Then I want it back. At the next hearing, Autumn showed up. But she wasn't alone. She walked in flanked by a man I had never seen. Tall, older, dressed like someone trying too hard to look casual. Trina leaned toward me and whispered, "He's her financial advisor, the one listed on the frozen Reno account." Trina stood, calm, deliberate. "Your Honor," she said, "we have new evidence showing that Autumn Calhoun, acting without medical power of attorney, initiated financial transfers totaling over $670,000. These were moved into 4 separate accounts, 2 of which were set up post-accident. Additionally, we have a signed affidavit from the original bank officer who handled the insurance disbursement. That officer confirms the policy was redirected without consent from either Bryce Latham or Lorraine Latham." Autumn's lawyer objected. Too late. The judge allowed the evidence. And then came the real break. The compliance officer who flagged the Reno account was present. He took the stand. He was calm, exacting. And when he spoke, the courtroom changed. He described the transfer attempt, the metadata on the files, the digital signature from Autumn's device. And then he dropped the final piece. There was an attempt to assign a new beneficiary to the secondary trust, he said, using a forged e-signature. The system detected anomalies consistent with copy-paste tampering. The signature matched Mrs. Latham's name, but was overlaid on a scanned version of an old gym registration form from 2014. Gasps. A ripple through the room. Autumn didn't move. She stared ahead. But her hands were locked so tightly in her lap that her knuckles turned white. I felt no joy, only clarity. That was the moment I stopped doubting myself. After court, Trina and I walked to the parking garage. "She'll try to negotiate," Trina said. "I expect her lawyer to reach out soon, probably to offer a settlement or partial asset return." I shook my head. "No, we don't settle. She stole from Bryce. From me. She tried to erase my entire name from my son's life. That doesn't get negotiated. That gets corrected." Trina didn't argue. Back at the hospital, I found Bryce staring out the window. The light hit his face just right. And for a moment, he looked like he did when he was 8 years old, sitting at the kitchen table, legs too short to touch the floor. "I heard," he said. I sat beside him. "Then you know." He turned to me. "I'm sorry." That cracked something in me, but I held it together. "It wasn't your fault," I said. "What matters is that you know now, and we have time to fix it." He nodded, and we sat there, mother and son, silent in a way that felt whole. That night, I received an email from Autumn's legal team. It was short. Proposed settlement, return of half assets, revocation of trust, non-disclosure agreement required. I didn't even forward it to Trina. Instead, I sat at the small table in my room, picked up my notebook, and drew a line straight through the word fear. Then I wrote a new word beneath it. Truth. And under that, another. Begin. The morning of the final hearing arrived without ceremony. I stood at the sink in the motel bathroom, brushing my hair with slow, even strokes. The light above the mirror buzzed faintly. I stared at my reflection, not for vanity, but for grounding. My face looked older than it had a month ago, not because of time, but because of everything that had been pulled to the surface. Trina picked me up at 8 sharp. She wore her confidence like armor, but today there was something more in her eyes. A calm fierceness, like she already knew we wouldn't leave that courthouse the same people who walked in. As we drove, she laid it out one last time. Today, we present the full timeline. The fraud, the hidden accounts, the digital forgeries. We lay bare every action Autumn took, and we make our case not just for restitution, but for a permanent legal disqualification. She won't be able to touch another dime. Bryce will regain control, and you, Lorraine, will be reinstated in every document she erased you from. I nodded. I didn't need justice to feel like revenge. I just needed the truth to be louder than her lies. The courthouse was already crowded. Word had spread. A few other attorneys sat in the back, watching. Legal curiosity, Trina had said. Autumn's tactics weren't rare in theory, but they were rarely this sloppy in execution. Autumn arrived in a sleek beige coat, alone this time. Her posture stiff, her lips set in a straight, unreadable line. She didn't look at me. That told me more than any glare ever could. She wasn't confident. She was bracing. We sat. The judge entered, and the room settled into the kind of silence that presses against your chest. Trina started. She introduced a timeline, built from records, surveillance footage, and depositions. Every transaction, every login trace, every irregular signature. She didn't dramatize it. She just laid it down like bricks on a path. Brick after brick, leading to the same conclusion: intentional, calculated theft. When she finished, she paused. Then she called the final witness. It was Bryce. The room turned. He walked in slowly, thinner than before, but stronger. A hospital staffer wheeled in his IV stand behind him, but he stood on his own. His voice, when he spoke, was low but clear. I didn't authorize those transfers. I didn't know about the secondary trust. I don't remember signing any documents. And if I had, my mother would have been by my side. He turned, briefly, and looked straight at Autumn. She wasn't. No one spoke. Then it was Autumn's turn. Her attorney stood. He declined to call a witness. Instead, he made a brief statement. There was confusion, poor communication, misunderstanding around power of attorney. My client deeply regrets the distress caused. It was a weak hand. Even the judge looked unmoved. By noon, the judge had everything she needed. She recessed for 1 hour. I sat outside on a cold marble bench. Trina handed me a thermos of lukewarm coffee. I held it but didn't drink. She's going to rule in our favor, Trina said. I nodded, not from certainty, but because it didn't matter anymore. It wasn't just about winning. It was about ending it with my dignity intact. At 1:14 p.m., we returned to the courtroom. The judge spoke plainly. She outlined the breaches. She declared the forged trust null and void. She restored the original structure. She barred Autumn from managing any financial decisions for Bryce indefinitely. She ordered restitution, and she referred one portion of the case to the district attorney for review, potential criminal charges. Autumn didn't flinch, but her hands shook when she gathered her papers. I watched her walk out. I didn't follow her with my eyes. I just looked at the spot she left behind. The space. The silence. When court adjourned, Bryce came to me. He hugged me in front of everyone. Not as apology, but as truth. That night, Trina and I met in the same diner we used to plan everything. The lighting was terrible. The pie was mediocre. But the coffee was warm. "I'll stay on," she said. "Make sure the restitution is paid properly. We'll garnish what's left of her assets." "Good," I said. "But Lorraine," she continued, "you have choices now. You're in control of your home again. Your money, your life." That word again. Control. I thought about the house. Empty now, but still mine. I thought about the letters Bryce used to write as a boy, folded into paper airplanes and left on my nightstand. I thought about the mornings I spent watching sun creep across the kitchen tile while I waited for him to come home from school. It wasn't the money I'd reclaimed. It was the memory of who I was before all of this. As we left the diner, Trina turned to me. "You don't have to forgive her." "I know," I said. "But you do have to let go. Eventually." "I will. In pieces." I went home that night. I stepped inside the house, now quiet, now safe. I didn't turn on all the lights, just the lamp in the corner, where I used to read Bryce bedtime stories. I stood there for a long time. Then I walked to the closet, pulled out a box labeled with my handwriting. Inside were the originals, documents, letters, and a photo of me holding Bryce the day he was born. Not everything had been erased. Some things endured, and those I would build from. I returned to the house slowly, like stepping into someone else's story. The place looked almost untouched. Autumn hadn't redecorated much, just rearranged things to erase my presence. My chair was gone from the sunroom. The pot rack in the kitchen had been taken down. All the family photos had been replaced with framed quotes and magazine covers. Still, the house breathed familiar. I walked through the rooms one by one, letting the memories settle around me like dust. Bryce's old bedroom door still creaked the same. The coat hooks in the hallway still held the curve of our habits. It wasn't about reclaiming property. It was about reclaiming space, a space where my dignity could stretch without apology. The days that followed moved slowly. I stayed quiet. I did not reach out to Bryce. I wanted him to come to me on his own. The boy I raised would know when it was time. In the meantime, I put the house back together in small ways. I unpacked one box a day. I replaced the locks with my own set. I went to the garden store and picked out perennials to plant in the front yard. The soil was still good. That gave me comfort. One morning, while organizing the linen closet, I found a folder shoved far in the back, behind a stack of unused towels. Inside were more copies of documents Autumn had forged. She must have kept them as a backup. There was also a thumb drive. I brought it to Trina. She scanned the files and looked up. She made more than one attempt to move funds internationally. These never went through, but it adds another layer of intent. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. She was prepared to vanish if it didn't go her way. Trina nodded. She knew how close she was skating to federal charges. For a moment, I felt sick, not because of fear, but because I had let this woman sit across from me at my dinner table. I had trusted her with my son. I had trusted her to keep the family whole when I could no longer hold it up myself. That trust was shattered now. I didn't want to live in bitterness, but I also couldn't pretend. Later that week, I met Bryce at the rehab facility. He had asked, finally, quietly, no fanfare, just a simple call to say he was ready. He looked stronger, not just physically, but clearer, lighter somehow, like something had burned away. "I didn't know," he said. "I didn't know half of what was happening, and I hate that." I nodded, letting him have the space to speak. "She kept me in a bubble, managed my meds, filtered everything. When I started waking up again, she told me you had left, that you'd given up on both of us." The weight of it sat between us. "I'm sorry, Mum. I should have known better. I should have fought harder." I didn't cry. I didn't need to. I just placed my hand over his and gave it a small squeeze. "You came back," I said. "That's enough." He told me he had spoken to his lawyer. He was filing for divorce. Cleanly. No negotiation. Trina was overseeing the separation of assets and the medical trusts. He was making sure she would never be able to influence his decisions again. "I want to start over," he said. "So do I." But starting over wasn't about going backward. It wasn't about pretending nothing had happened. I went home and sat down at the kitchen table that night, pulling out an old notepad. I made a list, not of chores, not of goals, but of boundaries, what I would allow back into my life, and what I wouldn't. Forgiveness wasn't on the list yet, but peace was. A few days later, I received a letter from Autumn's attorney, a formal statement indicating she would not appeal the restitution order. She would comply. She had no choice now. There was no apology, no explanation, just a signature. I folded the letter and placed it in the back of a drawer. That same afternoon, I received a call from an old friend, Miriam, a woman I used to volunteer with at the shelter. She said they needed someone to manage the senior meal program again. The coordinator had stepped down unexpectedly. I hesitated, then said yes. Not because I needed to fill time, but because I needed to feel useful again. Not as someone's mother, not as someone's victim, just as me. The first day back at the center, one of the women, Nancy, maybe 65, hugged me without hesitation. "We missed you," she said. "Your casseroles were the only ones with flavor." We laughed, and it felt good. Real. That night, I drove home with the windows down. The spring air was cool and soft against my face. I parked in the driveway and sat in the car for a moment, watching the porch light flicker on. I was home, not just physically, but in the quietest corners of myself. It took me a few weeks to settle into a rhythm again. Mornings were quiet. The sun crept in through the kitchen windows just like it used to. I drank my coffee without hurry. I didn't check my phone every 5 minutes. There was no dread waiting for me on the screen anymore. Bryce called every couple of days now. Nothing long, nothing heavy, just enough to remind me he was rebuilding too. He was staying with a friend while final paperwork was being finalized. His voice sounded steadier each time. There was no mention of Autumn, and I didn't bring her up. Some wounds didn't need words, just time. At the senior center, I was back to running the Friday meals. There was something healing about slicing vegetables for 100 people. Hands busy, mind quiet. I had missed the smell of roasted garlic and the sound of metal trays clanking against countertops. And I had missed the women. They had a way of making life feel simple again, even just for a moment. One afternoon, Miriam sat down next to me while I folded napkins. She didn't ask anything. She just placed a sealed envelope in front of me. "Your name's on it," she said. "Came through the shelter's mailbox. No return address." I opened it slowly, unsure what to expect. Inside was a check, A cashier's check. From a private escrow account. $70,000. No note, no explanation. My first instinct was suspicion. But something in my chest told me exactly where it came from. Autumn. I had nearly forgotten about the restitution order. Trina said it would take months, maybe even years, to collect. But here it was. A portion, at least. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt clean. That night, I placed the check in a drawer. I didn't rush to deposit it. It was no longer about the money. It was about the line, the one that had been crossed and now redrawn. The following Sunday, I drove to the hospital where Bryce had started volunteering. He wasn't doing heavy shifts, just small things, guiding patients, filing charts, talking to families who needed someone to listen. He said it helped him stay grounded. I watched him from the hallway for a moment. He didn't see me. He was talking to a man in a wheelchair, nodding with quiet patience. It was the same look his father used to have when calming down a nervous customer at the repair shop. A soft strength. He had found his way back to it. We talked afterward on a bench near the parking lot. He didn't ask to move back in, and I didn't offer. That wasn't the relationship we needed now. We were rebuilding something different, something slower, more honest. "I'm looking at night classes," he said. "Social work or something close." I smiled. "That sounds like you." He nodded. I think I forgot who I was for a long time. We sat there for a while without speaking. Sometimes that's the only way healing happens, not in loud declarations, but in shared silence. A week later, I received a certified letter. Official this time. The final accounting from the court. Trina had handled everything perfectly. My accounts had been restored. The forged authorizations had been struck down. The house was now legally and irrevocably mine. The insurance company had confirmed the remainder of the withheld funds would be issued within the month. It was done. Not in the dramatic way people imagine, but in quiet completion. That night, I stood in the hallway and looked at myself in the mirror. I hadn't changed much. Same silver hair, same tired lines around my mouth. But I had changed entirely. I was no longer someone waiting to be respected. I had claimed that back. Not through anger, not through revenge, but through truth. And that would be enough. The morning Bryce came by with his old duffel bag. I knew things had shifted for good. He didn't ask for space in the closet or mention moving back. He simply brought it in, set it down, and said he would take the guest room for a while. I didn't argue. I just handed him clean sheets and told him the window in that room stuck if the weather turned too dry. We moved around each other that week, like people learning a new dance. No expectations, no assumptions. Just two people who had seen what it looked like to lose each other and weren't eager to repeat it. I found peace in the way he offered to fix the railing on the porch. He didn't say much, just brought his tools and got to work. I made soup and didn't hover. That was our language now. Small, quiet efforts. No one needed to prove anything anymore. One evening, after dinner, I placed the sealed envelope from the insurance company in front of him. He looked at it, confused. "Final payout," I said. "The remaining 160,000. He hesitated. I nodded. "I want you to open it. With me." So he did. Hands slow, deliberate. He unfolded the papers, read the numbers, let out a breath that seemed to carry months of guilt. I didn't need to say I forgave him. That wasn't the point. What mattered was that I was no longer afraid to draw boundaries, to speak plainly. "I've set up a living trust," I told him. "You'll have access to it when I'm gone, not before." He looked up, eyes wet but steady. "I understand." "I know you do." I smiled, not because it was over, but because it had begun again, this time on the right ground. The house felt warmer in the weeks that followed, not fuller, just steadier. Bryce got a part-time job at the community health centre. I started a small garden in the back, just herbs and tomatoes. I didn't need to reclaim anything big, just my rhythm, my days. One Sunday afternoon, I invited Trina and her partner over for coffee. We sat on the porch, the four of us. There was no talk of court, no mention of autumn, just laughter, old stories, and a light breeze that carried the scent of basil and cut grass. Bryce refilled cups without being asked, listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, it came from a place I hadn't seen in him for years, a place that had been quiet too long. Later that night, as I washed the cups, I looked out the window at the backyard. The wind moved gently through the tall grass, the way it always had. But something in me had changed. I didn't brace for the next loss anymore. I wasn't waiting for someone to decide I mattered. I already had. I stood there a while longer, letting the water run, my fingers resting on the edge of the sink. I had weathered a kind of storm few people talk about. The storm of betrayal that comes not from strangers, but from the ones you raised, the ones you loved with your whole self. But I had come through it. And on the other side, I found something worth more than forgiveness or revenge. I found myself, and that would be enough. If you've ever felt cast aside by the very people you gave your life to, then maybe you heard your own story in mine. I hope this journey reminded you that dignity has no expiration date, and neither does healing. You are not alone, and you are not invisible. Share this if it touched you, and tell me, what did this story awaken in you?